All right, guys, welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here bringing our 2025 preview and prediction for the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Looking at this coaching staff, it's going to be a new look one as Dave Clawson decided to step down at the end of 2024. And of course, Warren Ruggiero, his longtime offensive coordinator, will be moving on as well. So it's going to be a new era here for Wake. Jake Diker comes over from Washington State. Pretty respectable 23-20 record in 3.5 years there for the Cougars. Rob Ezel with the offensive coordinator. He spent the past 4 seasons at South Alabama. And then Scotty Hazelton, he's kind of known throughout coaching circles. Spent last season at Texas, will be defensive coordinator. Solid offseason, 63rd in high school ranks, top 50 portal class. 2 straight 4-8 seasons, though, leading to Clawson going ahead and deciding to depart. Things started with this offense. This is a group that was, solid, I guess you could say. 26 points per game, top 50 passing offense. But obviously it wasn't anything special. Now they're only going to return 2 starters, so they go ahead and hit the portal heavy. And I like what they were able to accomplish at quarterback. Maybe not so much the Robbie Ashford edition, who did get on the field last year for South Carolina versus Akron. He did look sharp. He enters his 4th season in CFB, mainly as a rushing specialist. Has shown some ability to make plays out as a passer, out of the pocket as well. He struggles with accuracy and ball security. I think what they're going to do here is they're going to give the keys to a very interesting true sophomore, Deshaun Purdy. He was originally going to go to Florida, ends up flipping, though, to Wake in that cycle. 6'4", 220, had some really good games. Had some poor ones as well at Charlotte. Has a massive arm, though. Touch passes will go 40 yards downfield with ease. I think he has power in his arm. Does a really good job attacking downfield. Will need to grow all around as a quarterback. This is a guy who has some great upside, though, in Deshaun Purdy, Nick. And obviously you don't want him to do too good or he'll just go ahead and leave your program as well. But I think Wake Forest, they're going to invest everything into this kid and hope he sticks around. And I think they'll get good results if he stays.
Sean Purdy is a very interesting prospect to lead the way at quarterback for this Wake Forest team. I think he's a very intriguing player they added from Charlotte. He was looking at Florida previously out of the portal here. There were some interesting high upside moments for him. 1,800 yards passing I thought wasn't bad on 200 attempts. About 9 yards per attempt. 10 touchdowns for him last year, but he had a 50% comp rate and 6 picks. So there were some issues with accuracy, but he does profile to be a decent quarterback at 6'4", 228. A very interesting frame for him as well. I think Purdy is the guy they're going to rock with here. I think it makes a lot of sense for him to start. He's got a lot of high upside potential, obviously a lot of interesting programs. We're looking at him through the portal here. He ends up going to Wake Forest here. I think it's a solid add overall. Robbie Ashford's a player that has some experience. He's been in a lot of different programs, a product out of Hoover, Alabama. I mean, he was at Oregon, Auburn, South Carolina. Ended up, having, some interesting moments here and there at South Carolina last year, but only attempted 32 passes. Did have 2 touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's a pretty agile body if they want to go for quarterback that's more agile and can run the ball. Overall, though, I think we're going to rock with Purdy here. I think Purdy will be a really solid, starting option for Wake Forest and could develop into a decent quarterback. I don't think he's going to light the world on fire or anything, but I think he's not a horrible asset to kind of throw out there and start in this year one of a new era at Wake Forest.
Yeah, and Jake Diker, this is the same guy that was just with John Mateer last year, so let's not assume that this guy can't, deliver when it comes to coaching the quarterback position, because the guy that started in the bowl game for Wazoo as well also looked pretty solid. So I think Diker has a way with these quarterbacks, and I think Purdy's going to look really good at some point. One of the nation's best running backs returns, Damon Claiborne. Love that he stuck around because he could have went anywhere in the country, in my opinion. Makes an impact at all areas of the game. He's got burst, nice long speed at 5'10", 200. He has nice vision, shows patience on inside zone runs. This is not going to be a mesh-style offense anymore, so it'll be interesting to see how he can kind of adjust to that. And that offense really helps you develop that aforementioned patience. So now he's going to be showcasing that burst and a more, more consistent approach for this offense. So I think Claiborne's going to be in for another phenomenal year. Tate Carney's going to return as running back 2, had some solid production, had 7 scores on the year. 3 of them came versus Louisiana Lafayette, which was a close loss, so his big play was certainly important. Ty Clark, 6', 210, got a few touches last year. He'll be the number 3 back. Pretty good room here. Having Claiborne at the top is obviously significant in that ranking, and again, I think he's going to have a great year, and a lot of respect goes to him.
Yeah, if you're looking for a best player and a guy to watch on Wake Forest here, I think it's Claiborne. He's the best player on this roster and a very talented player at that. 1050 for him on the ground last year, 4.6 yards per attempt and 11 scores. Had about 87.5 yards per game, a pretty impressive number there. Also a good asset in the passing game, although the system is a little bit different, so maybe he won't be relied on as much, but still had 250 and 11 yards per grab, 2 scores last year. Overall, I like what Claiborne can do. I think he's a very talented player and the best player on this roster. Tate Carney's not a little bad asset either. 339 for him on the ground, 4.6 4.1 yards per attempt, 6 scores, also had 113 and a touchdown receiving. So 2 really solid backs that they return on this offense. Ty Clark is on the roster as well, who's not a bad little piece. Running back room, certainly a strength on this team across the board, a really good unit with some solid key leaders up the top there, including Claiborne.
Look at the wide receiver group. It's not an impressive one. Micah Mays didn't see the field in the first 4 games, but caught a pass in all but 1 game the rest of the year at 6'2", 195. Should be a starting outside pass catcher. Sterling Burkhalter comes over after a 200-yard season for Cincy. Carlos Hernandez, he had a pretty good year for Wazoo, 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. Reginald Vick comes over from the FCS level, posted 1,100 yards and 12 touchdowns for Virginia Union. Sawyer Recanelli last year had a 400-yard season for Montana. Chris Barnes also comes over from Washington State, only saw a few reps though on the other hand. I think this is a makeshift unit. I think they can probably have a solid passing attack with what is here, but mainly unproven guys when it comes to this level of play. I think you're looking at guys like Vick and Hernandez to be the standouts, and Mays will be solid as well. But I don't think they're going to be anything too special. Obviously, we've seen worse units, Nick, but I definitely think this is the weakest part of the offense.
Yeah, it's one of the weaker units in the conference, if not the weakest unit in the conference. It's definitely a weak part of this team overall. I don't really love what I'm seeing here. Micah Mays comes in, returns for this team, 218, 13.6 yards per grab, 2 scores for him. They're going to target him and see what he can do. They bring in Benson from Tennessee State. He was not bad for them at the JUCO level. Maybe he'll be an okay player here. Sterling Burkhalter comes in from Cincinnati, 191, 17.4 yards per grab, and a score for him last year on limited grabs. He was not bad. Sawyer Recanelli comes in from Montana. He had some interesting production there. I think Carlos Hernandez is probably your best add out of the portal overall from Wazoo. 400 yards for him, 12.8, and 5 scores last year. He's a guy they're going to rely on. Reginald Vick coming in, as well as Chris Barnes. Vick coming in from the FCS level. Overall, this is a weak unit. I just think there's no way to sugarcoat it here. I don't really love the talent they have. This is a passing attack that was pretty good last year, but they lose some talented players in Taylor Morton and Horatio Fields. Overall, I just think this unit will take a step back this year.
Now I move to the offensive line, which was a great strike for Wake Forest. A lot of their players ended up going to other programs to be starters, and that's going to lead to the entire group being departed. So they're going to go to the portal themselves. Melvin Saini from Temple, who's an above-average player for them, starting right tackle last fall. Roderick Talaviva wasn't all that good as the starting left guard for Wazoo. Devin Kalani, 6'4", 320, on the other hand, was a great starting center for Wazoo, so that's a great opportunity there for them. George Sell saw 190-plus snaps at both guard spots for Wake last year and was quite good, so he's going to move into a full-time starting role as a veteran of the program at right guard. Falil Fa'amoe was a 3-year starter for Wazoo at right tackle, so he's going to slot right in there with ease. 6'5", 317. They also brought over a redshirt freshman in A.J. Husson from Washington State. So Ben Arbuckle got the more flashy job as the offensive coordinator of Oklahoma, but Dykert brought over a good chunk of that offensive line, Nick, which I think is really impressive because Oklahoma's offensive line, they have open spots. They were probably the worst in the country last year. So this speaks volumes to what Dykert was able to accomplish, and that's an A+ in my book with this offensive line, what he did in the portal, and mainly bringing the guys over with him from Pullman.
Yeah, it was pretty smart to bring over a lot of the guys on what was a pretty strong offensive line last year up in Pullman. I think it was a good unit. I think Dykert really brought some of his better players in. Kalani at center is a really solid player. Same as Famalamore on the right tackle position. I think he's really good. I think left side's solid as well. Some interesting pieces. I think George Sell's a really good returning guy, solid player to have. This offensive line should be pretty solid here. I think that it's good to have a bunch of guys coming from the same program. I like what they return in Sells as well, or George Sell that is as well. I think he's a solid piece. Overall, I think this should be a decent offensive line come the end of the season.
I definitely think they'll be just fine up front. Certainly not going to be as good as last year's group, though. Giving it a C+ is the offensive verdict. Wake always had good offenses, but that really fell off once Sam Hartman left and finally had the Clausen, and in his long-time OC stepping down. I like the add of Purdy, and he's going to impress at some point. That offensive line should be above average, while Claiborne, again, is one of the top backs in the nation. I think you see immediate improvement from this offense. Consistency is probably going to lack, and some of the better defenses will have their number, no doubt. I don't just see them falling off a cliff by any means at all, Nick, and I think the numbers you see this year are certainly going to surpass the ones from 24.
I think the numbers will be similar to last year, probably a little bit better. In general, this is an offense that has some interesting pieces. I think Deshaun Purdy could be a solid quarterback, that is, for this team. Damon Claiborne's a great player, running back, best player on this team. Will be fun to watch. The wide receiver room is weak and inexperienced. I'm definitely worried about that. The offensive line profiles to be a pretty solid unit come the end of the season, and I think they'll be able to run the ball pretty effectively. They struggled to run the ball at times last year. They're 97th in the nation. I think they'll certainly improve in that regard, but the passing will regress a little bit to kind of balance that out. Could be an interesting offense. I think they'll probably be around 26 points per game again this year, maybe 27 if things go right. This isn't a phenomenal offense, but I think it's a good transition unit into a new era here.
And I move to the defensive side of the ball for the Deacons. This is a group that certainly was not very good last year. It never really had been under Clausen. Despite having some nice talent, they just struggled immensely. See the numbers on screen outside the top 100, numerous stats. They're going to return 4 starters here. B.J. Williams saw nearly 400 snaps last year off the edge. Was a really good run defender. And the hope is he can bring that same level of play to the table in the pass rushing department. Like the ad of Gabe Krishke from Colorado State. Did work versus the run. Also had 7 sacks as a starter for them. Langston Hardy was a quality starter for UConn. He's a 250-pound edge rusher. Near Gatkuf was a good starter in 2023. Missed the first half of the year due to the injury, but was a really good run defender in both years. Undersized, though, at 237. Plays hard. Only has 1 career sack. Interior defensive line, they're going to return Zach Lovishkan, who saw over 300 snaps last fall, 6'3", 280. They also have another 280 pounder in Wyatt Crespi. Enters his senior season, was barely played in his career. Jaden Loving, a 317-pounder from Western Kentucky, was a good gap clogger in the middle. Dallas Avalova was a really good 290-pound pass rusher with 10 sacks in 2 years at Idaho. So this is not a bad group they have put together here. Pass rush might not be ideal, but I think their run defense seems primed to move ahead as they have a good surplus of bodies. Size isn't exactly ideal, but I think they're going to play hard and they'll be respectable against the run. 80th last year. I guess you can consider that respectable. I'd expect them to be around that same area.
This defense wasn't great last year, but they did show some strongness against the run at times. I think the defensive line is a solid unit again here. I like what they have. I like some of the players and sort of the production and potential out of some of these guys. You look at B.J. Williams, 23 total tackles last year, 3 tackles for loss, 2 fumble recoveries. He's not bad. Zach Lovelinch was not bad either. 13 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. He's a decent player. Then you look at the guys they added from the portal. A lot of interesting names there. Jaden Loving from Western Kentucky, he had 9 total tackles last year, had 36, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks the year prior. He's an interesting asset. Gabe Kirschke coming in from Colorado State's a very intriguing ad. 42 total tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 6.5 sacks, 8 QB hurries, 2 forced fumbles, 2 pass breakups. He's a pretty interesting name. Nuar Gawaka coming over from Colorado State as well, the Canadian prospect. Is a pretty good player. 15 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, a sack last year. He had 6.5 TFLs in 2023. They bring in a couple other pieces here and there that I think could be okay. Overall, this should be a decent pass rush coming into the season. I think there'll be a strength on this defense. They'll put some numbers up. They'll get some sacks. They'll find themselves in the backfield. Not going to blow you away or anything, but they should be a better unit in the conference and probably a better part of this defense.
Now you look at the linebacking group. Dylan Hazen returns to his starting spot at linebacker, being one of the best players on this defense. Stout versus the run, makes plays often in the backfield. Quincy Bryant, he was quite elite in his 350-plus snaps, great in coverage. It's consistent versus the run. Aiden Hall saw 150-plus snaps, but wasn't all that good. Frank Cusano, redshirt freshman from Washington State. I think it's a pretty good group here due to the top starters, but obviously I didn't name many guys because depth is not all that ideal for Wake in the middle. I'm sure there's plenty of guys that have scholarships or walk-ons that are get involved. They also had another transfer in Alec Amara Sen. That is. I don't know. I think this group would be good because of the 2 starters, but if they get hurt, Nick, it's probably not going to be all that great.
Yeah, the depth here is definitely a little bit limited. Quincy Bryant, I think, is a good player. 50 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, and an interception for him. I think they bring back Aiden Hall, who didn't do a whole lot for them last year. He's not a bad player. 12 total tackles and a sack for him. Dylan Hazen's probably your best asset at linebacker and a guy that's certainly proven to be one of the better players on this defense. 84 total tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 1 sack, and a pick for him. A couple other pieces here and there out of the portal, but nothing too crazy. This linebacking unit, it's serviceable, right? I think it's a decent enough unit, but it's nothing that's really going to drive me crazy or blow me away with sort of stats here. Just a reliable unit that won't really burn you too much, but won't go out there and make a ton of plays. A very middle of the road unit for a very middle of the road defense.
Well, look at the secondary. Once again, 127th in pass defense. I don't know what the problem was because every year this team seemed to have talent in the back end. They had playmakers, and they would always be outside the top 120 in pass defense. Just couldn't cover anybody ever, it seemed. And, obviously they're going to be doing a bit of a revampment here. Jackson Mule was a starting corner last year. He was below average. Trevon West only played in 1 game last year. Isn't likely to start over the NC import, Karan Prunty, who was a good 3-year starter for them. Sasha Garcia also arrives from William and Mary after a good single season of starting for them. Zamari Stevenson can also play outside corner. He's projected for the slot, though, for this upcoming season. The safety group returns a veteran of the program. I really like Nick Anderson. He's been great in coverage in his 4-year career. He really evolved in his run defense prowess over the last 2 seasons as well. Played 850 snaps last year, so he's a real warrior there at safety. Devon Patterson played all over as the stronger patroller of the group, was good in coverage and also respectable against the run. Saw most of his snaps come in the slot as well. Rashawn Tung also saw a versatile role. He was great versus the run, nearly 300 snaps. So I think the safety group's pretty impressive. The corner group certainly not as in good standing. And again, doesn't matter how many talented DBs they have, they just could never produce in the back end. And it was pretty bad last year. I wonder if this new staff can change that notion that the Deacons have had for a while, Nick. What do you think of the secondary that's really not all that poor on paper once again?
Yeah, it's not terrible on paper, but I still question whether or not these guys will be good. They were brutal last year, 127th in the nation. I'm curious to see if they can even make enough improvements to be a respectable unit. I think Nick Anderson's a great player to return at safety, a number one tackler last year. Always nice to get your top tackler back. 122 total tackles, a tackle for loss, 2 picks, and a pass breakup for him last year. He's a really solid asset. Devon Patterson I thought was pretty good as well. 74 total tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups from him. I don't think he's a bad player at all. Rashawn Togue was not great for this team last year. 35 total tackles, a pick for him. Jackson Mole, showed some progress. 34 total tackles, 2 pass breakups. He's not bad. Samari Stevenson, 29 total tackles, a tackle for loss, and a pick for him last year, plus a pass breakup. They went to the portal, added some interesting bodies. Ashad Williams comes in from North Alabama. Curious to see what his impact is. Same thing with Kyron Prunty, who will probably be a starter from North Carolina A&T. He was not bad. Braylon Johnson didn't do a whole lot at Virginia Tech, but they think he could be a high upside player. And Sasha Garcia comes in from William & Mary while not being terrible there. Ladarius Webb was an interesting ad from South Alabama, probably your best ad in the portal. 41 total tackles, 2 interceptions, and 3 pass breakups last year. Still think this is a poor unit on paper. I think there are some interesting pieces here, but I just don't know exactly how much productivity you could expect out of a unit that was 127th in the nation last year. Very intriguing pass defense, though, if they can find a way to improve it all and really play better as a unit as a secondary.
C-plus defense for me. I think the Demon Deacons have always been below average, and a new scheme change is certainly warranted. I think for this year, they can improve versus the run. They have 2 really good linebackers, and that impressive safety group should help in the secondary. Sounds like enough to showcase some improvement, but that's hard label to assume. So we'll wait and see, but I'm hopeful for them. Looking at the schedule and the prediction for Wake Forest, they have no lead man, or they have a new lead man, that is, for the first time since 2014. I think it's certainly for the better, as the division just stalled out with Wake, where they were very respectable for a long time, competing at the top part of the conference for a little bit, making bowl games and whatnot, and now they're coming off back-to-back 4-win seasons. The roster isn't awful, and with some better coaching, they could get back to the results they saw in Clawson's prime. I think the offense has some upside, and I think they can shock people if Purdy ends up being a really good starter next to Claiborne, while the defense has good players as well. I think they can play closer ball on a weekly basis than most will admit. Still, it's going to be a 3-9 season for me. I don't see them being able to win any other game outside of maybe Oregon State on this schedule than what we've predicted. I think this is going to work out long-term, Nick, where they can get back to winning 6 or 7 games per year. So I'm excited to see how it pans out, but 2025 will not be pretty.
25 will not be pretty for Jake Dykert and company. I think Dave Clawson had done some solid things here, right? He took this team to 7 straight bowl games, won a division crown, the Atlantic, played for a conference title in 2021 against Pitt. They ultimately lost that game, but they won the Gator Bowl that year. That was a pretty solid season, but it was just not really working long term. I think he kind of burned out a little bit and burned himself out. They went 4-8 in back-to-back seasons, and I think it was time for him to move on. They bring in a high-flying younger coach who's 41 from Washington State, who got a lot of success out of a program that was kind of in the middle of the road there. They went 7-6, 8-4 in 2 of those seasons. So I think Jake Dykert is a pretty solid hire overall. The schedule's not particularly easy here. I think 3 wins is where I'm at as well. I don't really see much more than that. The books have him at 4.5 as the over/under. I think it's kind of intriguing. So I just can't really see 5 wins right here. Maybe you get 4 if you win at Oregon State, but it's tough to travel out to Corvallis, so I don't think that's an easy win at all. Wake Forest, tough program to work with. Obviously, the smallest enrollment of the Power 4 schools, really small endowment as well. The money is kind of tough to work with at Wake, so if you can get some success out of this, of the guys on your program, it can certainly go a long way. They went to the portal hard. They added a lot of different pieces here and there, but I still think they're one of the worst teams in the ACC and will find themselves going winless in conference this year, which is not something they did the last 2 years. They won a conference game at least one the last 2 years. So definitely a regression in that regard. But I think the long-term vision is pretty solid down there at Wake. I think it's a program that can turn around and be in contention in this conference again in the near future. A tough season, but I'm curious to see what the first year of this new project looks like.
That's me for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.